What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Hope you guys are doing well. Hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Share this out. Do all of the good stuff. Another episode of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Getting into a bit of a groove here with the season coming along. Usually these podcasts are out Saturdays and Tuesdays at 12:30 because I usually like to give the games a day to digest any extra information. And then Saturdays, the day right before, if there's a guy that's out, inactive, might not play, new developments, that's why I usually do it then. If there's any schedule change, I always update you guys. There probably won't be a Texans preview until next, I want to say Thursday, Friday-ish. The game is on Saturday, and I will be with a Texans content creator most likely. I did find one. So that's a good development there. But the New York Giants, after two very, very sweaty and tense joint practices, took a victory over the Detroit Lions. They could have honestly played in two quarters, because the third and fourth quarter, no team scored. But I'm not going to go over stats and stuff like that. I figure I'd leave that out of the way. It's a preseason game. And I might change that part for the regular season because a lot of people could just, see the stats on ESPN and stuff like that. But first thoughts. There's definitely a lot of positives. The negatives, I think, when you talk about the New York Football Giants in this game, I think they're easily fixable. I think you could clean it up. But there is one particular position that does worry me, though. Again, after the week of tense practices, the day off on Wednesday, I like the Giants coming out the way they did. Again, they could have came out better, but I'm happy with the effort, 14-3. It's a preseason game. You can't really judge too much off of an exhibition game where second and third string guys were playing. The Giants will probably play more guys next week against the Houston Texans, who are battling the Pittsburgh Steelers as I record this. And then the next week we'll see, because the Jets have a joint practice with the Giants, and the starters may not play. So let's talk about the quarterback room first. Then we'll get to the running back room, and then so on and so forth. That's how we'll break down this show. So you had Drew Lock and you had Tommy DeVito as the quarterbacks. Now, they cut Nathan Rourke about a week and a half ago. He wasn't really getting many snaps, and Daniel Jones obviously was not going to play with the two joint practices already happening. Well, Drew Lock made me worried about this quarterback room. I'm not even going to talk about the injury he sustained for a couple of minutes. I want to talk precisely about the way he's looked in camp, the way that DeVito has looked in camp, and so on and so forth. So if you guys have seen me in Spaces, Twitter Spaces that is, if you guys have seen me on the show that, I do here, or some of the videos I put out, premium takes with some of the guys over at Hardcore Sports, I have said that Tommy DeVito is the most consistent quarterback all of camp. And I didn't necessarily give a ringing endorsement to Drew Lock, because in practice, Drew Lock had some good throws, quick throws over the middle, the sidearm stuff he likes to do. But on long developing plays, he struggled to find the open guy and would throw it away, or he'd get sacked, stuff like that. And that was pretty much the story of what happened against the Lions, and I'm not too happy with that. I'm not going to sit here and make this about Daniel Jones, whether it's a positive or negative thing. Most of you guys know my views towards Daniel Jones. I don't think he's the franchise guy. I'm going to root for whatever quarterback's on the field because I think that's just the right thing to do, my personal opinion. But we have to assess the backup quarterback position, because if Daniel Jones does go down, is our season going to be saved a little bit, or is our season going to be completely over? Now, this is a very grim statement I'm about to make. I think the Giants should have invested somewhere else in terms of the backup QB position. As an early impression, if you guys want to take this as an overreaction, you can, and debate me in the comments section. I always welcome it. But Drew Lock obviously looked decent under the guys in Seattle. But before that, he was an average to below average quarterback, leading the league in interceptions and stuff like that. But he just looked lost. He just looked lost on Thursday to where he wasn't finding neighbors. He was holding on to the ball too long, which is another issue I have to pick with his coaching staff. But, he looked lost. He was just not himself to where, other people hyped him up as, okay, he's a capable quarterback. Drew Lock did not look capable of starting an NFL game last Thursday. My bad. He did not look capable of starting a game on Thursday. If the Giants had Daniel Jones injured for week 1, God forbid, and they put in Drew Lock, and this is what I have to grade Drew Lock off of, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, and the Giants would probably lose that game. And we saw last year, right, with the New York Jets, Zach Wilson was the backup quarterback. They didn't have anybody else. They had Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson, and Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle was quarterback 3. And guess what happened? Aaron Rodgers went down in week 1. Zach Wilson was a shit show. Then they tossed it over to Tim Boyle. Then they tossed it over to Simeon. Then to Wilson. It was a complete circus. And I think the Giants should avoid that. They should avoid that this year. Now, that's just my personal opinion on the quarterback room. DeVito outplaying Locke. It doesn't surprise me too much when it comes to camp, because I was there and I was able to see, okay, Tommy is taking less sacks. He is throwing the ball accurately. He's doing what Tommy DeVito does. It's not perfect NFL football. It's not spectacular or star, level NFL football. But Tommy DeVito was in the confines of his own standards of playing football. Like, he was playing at Tommy DeVito level. Now, the other thing with the quarterback room is Drew Lock is now injured. He has a hip pointer and an oblique injury and is expected to be out several weeks. Now, reality and what I wish for are going to be two separate things. I think the New York Giants should bring in another capable quarterback. Me personally, Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill, yes, he was with the Titans last year, has not been signed by anybody. All that other good stuff. But in reality, they will probably sign somebody like a Jacob Eason, a Matt Barkley, an E.J. Perry, someone who's, for say, a schmuck, someone who's a flunky, someone who's a camp body. If Nathan Rourke was a guy that was available, they probably would have said, okay, we're going to bring you in. We're going to bring you in for 3 weeks. And is it totally terrible to go into the season with Tommy DeVito as quarterback 2? No, but it's also not the preferred option. The Giants are keeping 3 quarterbacks either way. I don't know if you guys heard Phil Simms say it. I don't think they want to lose Tommy DeVito. I think there's a fame aspect to it as well. That's just my personal opinion. But I don't think the Giants are going to spend any of the $9 million that they currently have on an actual backup quarterback, because that's kind of a self-indictment on what they did in the offseason by signing Drew Lock. Now, if you trade or sign Drew Lock, you're going to incur dead money. That's just what's going to happen. Now, if you were to do something along the lines of put him on IR right now, I don't know if it's a weird thing, because the NFL installed all these different rule changes this offseason, and I believe one of them was the IR thing, because if you were to go on IR previous to the cut-down day, your season would be over unless you're cut with an injury settlement. I don't know if that's changed. So, for say it hasn't changed, for example, in this speaking scenario, if it hasn't changed, I wonder what they would do with Drew Lock. If they were serious about getting another quarterback in here, would they put Drew Lock on the IR? In reality, they're not going to do that. In reality, they'll wait a couple weeks. If he's not good by the time that week 1 rolls around, they'll put him on the initial roster and then just revert him to IR. Now, again, as I said before, I don't know if these rules changed. I think they have, but I'm going to go with the old impression that they did not. So, likely the situation is because of the injury to Drew Lock and because of the way things line up for the Giants, they're probably not bringing in someone of a good caliber or a decent caliber like a Ryan Tannehill. They'll probably bring in, again, somebody like a Matt Barkley, a Ben DiNucci, any of those caliber guys. Now, it's not going to make a lot of people happy, but it's what's going to happen if they choose to bring in another quarterback and not just roll with DeVito and Daniel Jones. No surgery is required for Locke, but again, you need a quarterback in week 3 of the preseason at least, because I don't expect Daniel Jones to play against the New York Jets with the joint practice. So that's really the quarterback situation, and I don't think they want to burst Jones's bubble too much. That's just my personal opinion. They did, but they didn't piss him off with the entire Hard Knocks thing about getting a quarterback. But at the same time, you're not having those conversations if he's not getting injured. Let's be honest. This is factual information. This is not feelings here. And 2, if he played like a franchise quarterback before he got injured. If he was on fire, we wouldn't have these conversations. But realistically, he was not playing good. I don't give a shit what the offensive line was doing. The offensive line was bad. We know that. And then he got injured. So there's that. And again, they probably are not going to bring somebody in to burst Daniel Jones's bubble or heighten him up, because Drew Lock, based on what I saw, was not good. So I'm just giving it how it is. I'm not on any quarterback side. I am a New York Giants content creator, and I'm a fan in second place. When I'm a fan, I'm watching my TV and reacting. But when I'm on here, I'm a content creator, and I'm giving you guys the unbiased opinion. Now, let's move to the running back room. The running back room has given me a good jolt of surprise. Now, I haven't seen a ton of Singletary in camp in terms of just rushing. You know, there's been some good runs here and there. But what I said previously on the training camp videos and some of the live streams I've been on is this. I want to see this in a live game, in a preseason game, when these guys start to tackle, when these guys are blocking guys up front and the running backs have actual holes to run through. The running back room definitely was a positive, probably one of the more positive things about this game. I will start with Tyrone Tracy. I didn't know who he was when he was drafted. I did some research. I'm like, okay, this guy could be pretty interesting for the Giants. And I talked a lot about how I was very negative about the pick on Eric Gray. I talked with Brandon Olson about how I was negative on the pick of Eric Gray because I just didn't like the pick. I thought he was very slow, and I didn't know what to expect. So last year we have the situation where he plays running back a little bit. He didn't get a touchdown or anything. I think his longest run was for like 12 yards maybe the entire season. Didn't get much reps. Failed as a punt returner and a kick returner. Let's start with that too. So pretty grim. But coming into this year, he's got a newborn opportunity with Saquon leaving, Matt Breida leaving as well, some competition in Dante Miller, Ja'Shawn Corbin, who was cut, and Jacob Sailors, who did not play. But to start with Tracy, his jump cuts were good, his elusiveness. If he had more space, you can tell he can hit home runs. Now, you could also tell that he's still learning the running back position because maybe there was a few things wrong with a play or two, but I'd love to see his receiving ability. I want to see the Giants line him up out wide. We won't get that to the regular season, though, because they don't want to expose anything and all the motions and stuff like that. But I liked what I saw out of Tyrone Tracy. I really did. 5 carries for 26 yards, no touchdowns. That's about 5.2 yards per carry. I like that. Hats off to Tyrone Tracy. He's been pretty much busting his ass this entire camp. Now, to the guy I disliked very much coming into this, I want to see consistency. But Eric Gray did a lot to keep my mouth shut, but also my mouth open in his performance against the Lions. He was hitting holes very well. His straight line speed hasn't been seen at this level before, and he actually did pretty solid as a receiver. He caught a pass that was like a little wheel route from Tommy DeVito on a 3rd down, 24-yard reception. And later on in the game, he had that big 48-yard run. Now, of course, you take that away, it's 3 carries for 4 yards, and, you could do all that shit. But you can't take it away because it's a part of the game. It's what he did. 13 yards per carry, 4 carries, 52 yards, longest run was 48, and 2 touchdowns. Now, what I've always wondered about Eric Gray, especially in this situation that the New York Giants don't really have a push-in back, a 3rd and 1, run it up the gut, is Eric Gray going to be that guy? Now, he's not fat. He's not Brandon Jacobs level bulky, but he's a guy that has straight line speed, looks like his vision improved, and it just seems like he's the best fit, in my opinion, to get those short yardage runs. If it's a 3rd and 2 or a 4th and 1, it seems like he's that guy to pull it forward. So, hats off to Eric Gray. Seriously, I mean that a lot. Hats off to Eric Gray. I want to see some consistency, but I don't think his roster spot is being burdened right now. Dante Miller, I think he did solid. I know obviously he's got a great story behind him. I've touted him. He's been doing good in camp. I think they tried to force the rock to him. Now, statistically, he did good, right? 19-yard run was his longest, 12 carries, 63 yards, 5.3 yards per pop, which the Giants averaged over 5.7 yards per pop on the ground, which is a good thing. But as far as Dante Miller goes, good production, solid production. I'd like to see a little bit more in the receiving game. As I've said, he had 2 catches for 7 yards. But it was pretty much towards the latter end of the game where the Giants, I don't want to say they weren't being competitive, but they were trying to evaluate guys, and I think Detroit knew they were running the football. And it was a point of the game where Detroit was not going to come back. They failed on numerous 4th downs, and boom. That's where Dante Miller got most of his burn. Preferably saying that he got it in the 4th quarter. I will say this, in addition, before we go to the offensive line, is Tyree Jackson will probably be the favorite target of the preseason. I thought it was going to be somebody like a Miles Boykin, but Tyree Jackson, I mean, he could separate decently. A former quarterback, has some quarterback tendencies under his belt. Now, his hands aren't the greatest, but he did stun me a little bit. I'm going to say that. But let's move to the offensive line. Let's start out with the negatives, which is really only one negative. I think all of the sacks were taken by the quarterbacks. Now, of course, they were taken by the quarterbacks. I know everybody's going to misquote that. But I think I'd say about 2 out of the 3 sacks that were taken by Giant quarterbacks was due to the fact that they held on to the ball too long. So that's a lesson to be learned by the quarterbacks. And that thing I was referring to earlier about ripping the coaching staff is, well, that's what happens when you don't blow fucking plays dead in practice. They let it go on. Even if it's a sack, they'll throw it. It's not babying them. It's just being real. If you're sacked in a game, you're sacked in a game. There's no throwing the football as you get hit and you're literally on the ground. That's called intentional grounding. And that's not going to fly. So I think they need to start blowing these plays dead. And I get it. Extra run, extra drive, whatever. But it clearly doesn't justify the means. We saw it last year when Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, and Tommy DeVito took more sacks than they should have. And again, I know the offensive line was terrible, but there are plays that the quarterback could do a lot better on. Now, speaking of people that could do a lot better, I really don't want to see Josh Azudu at offensive tackle again. And it really boggles my mind, and not buggles my mind, but boggles my mind as to why the Giants keep putting him in such a position. It's very interesting to me. I don't know why. Now, they drafted him as a guard, and very well, they could have promised that he was going to start, because 22, he got some rotations in, then he got injured. Then 23, he played guard, and then started to carve out a tackle role, and wasn't good at that because he gave up sacks against Arizona, he gave up sacks against Seattle, and he also got Daniel Jones hurt against the Dolphins. So those 3 games and what I saw all in that mixture are pretty much a proving point that Josh Ezeudu should not play offensive tackle. I think they're way too obsessed with his feet. Now, again, some people might misquote that, so take a pause. But they're way too obsessed with his quick feet. They think, oh, he's got quick feet, he could play tackle. No. What happened to not fitting square pegs in round holes? That's what the Giants are doing here. And if Ezeudu's not good at guard and he's not good at tackle, then he's just not a good offensive lineman, and he's not worth keeping on the roster. He's got, let's see, after this year, he's got, I think, a year left on his contract. So he's technically got 1 more year after this, which wouldn't be a bad thing to cut him, honestly. Because if this is what the Giants are looking for in a swing tackle, I'm not a fan. I am not a fan. So Josh Ezeudu, who's been dog water all camp, turned into dog shit in the game. He gave up a sack, couple of pressures. Not a big fan, but for some reason PFF decided to tout him as the 3rd or 4th best rated Giants player from the preseason game, which doesn't make any sense. Now, to go on to a guy that has been making a name for himself on a positive note is Josh Miles. If you notice, the guy who breaks the hole open for Eric Gray on that touchdown is Josh Miles. And he was graded lower than Josh Ezeudu. Now, Miles maybe had a bad rep or 2, but he's flying severely under the radar. The B reporters are not talking about him. The Giants content creators are not talking about him. I started that conversation, and I will take my flowers for it. Joshua Miles is the Devery Hamilton of this year. Now, some people don't like the name Devery Hamilton. I'm just throwing it out there. Devery Hamilton had no experience coming into the Giants camp in 22. He ended up making the roster for about the first 10 games as a guard and a tackle, then was cut. Joshua Miles, he's a guy that had little experience over in Arizona, didn't do much. With the Falcons, didn't do much. Signed by the Giants last year, didn't get any game action, and has pretty much shown himself out with the help of Carmen Brasillo. And you can't sit here and ignore good play. If somebody stands out in the preseason at a position of need, you cannot ignore that. If it's a wide receiver and you already have your wide receivers, okay. If it's just a luxury position, fine. But the Giants don't have a swing tackle right now. Matt Nelson's not good. Sorry to say that. Matt Nelson is not good. Now, another guy to keep an eye on is Jake Kubas. Kubas had some nice blocks on Thursday, and he's had a tremendous camp thus far, going up against different defensive linemen in the running game and the passing game. Now, does he make the roster? I don't know, because you still have Schlotman, you still have Morrissey, who are competing for that backup center role. I don't know who's going to win. You have Aaron Stinney. Kubas could fit on if Marcus McKeithen doesn't make it, and if Josh Ezeudu doesn't make it. But Kubas could also slip to the practice squad. But if other teams are evaluating, you won't see Kubas on the practice squad. You'll see Kubas on another squad, a team that is needy of O-linemen and O-line depth. So the Giants better be careful these next 2 weeks and make their evaluation sturdy, or else, guess what? You won't see Jake Kubas back in a Giants uniform, and you may say that about Joshua Miles too, but I think the O-line depth is pretty solid for the Giants thus far. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not building in any excuses or puffing them, but last year we did not see a guy or two that were ready for the backup roles. I mean, Matt Nelson's garbage. We could stick that out there. Matt Nelson's garbage. The other guys weren't bad. Like, they were not graciously bad. It's like, oh, this guy's terrible. The guy you would probably say that is Joshua Ezeudu. But outside him, I mean, you didn't really notice Jalen Mayfield too much. Schlotman, Marcellus Johnson, Yadni Kajust, Aaron Stinney, Marcus McKeithen, Those guys weren't awful. Again, we'll see what they do the next 2 weeks, but it's good to see the first preseason game we're not shitting our brains out over the O-line. So, and these guys could actually get picked up by other teams. Not like, the last few years where any guy that's cut by the Giants isn't picked up at all. So I could say quality O-line depth. Now let's get to the defense. Mouth is dry a little bit from talking too much. I am very, very thrilled, and maybe this is an overreaction. I am thrilled with the way the Giants played the run. I am thrilled with the way the Giants were able to get to the quarterback. They had 4 sacks on Nate Sudfeld. They had a total of 5 quarterback hits. I think it was more than that, if I'm going to be honest. They had a ton of pressures and 4 sacks, as I mentioned, on Nate Sudfeld and some on Hendon Hooker as well. He also took off several times. But they gashed the run pretty well, in my opinion. Now, you look at the stats, right? You take Sudfeld out of it. You have Hendon Hooker out of it. Okay, Sion Vaki, that's not great. 7.3 yards a pop. Reynolds did shit. Zonovan Knight did shit. Jake Funk did shit. And Jamar Jefferson did shit. So for guys that were playing with the second team, and I think Knight and Reynolds and Jamar Jefferson, if I'm remembering correctly, were with the second team, that's a pretty good endorsement of the second team defensive line, which consisted of Ryder Anderson, Elijah Chapman, Jordan Riley, and Raheem Nunez-Oches, if he played. I don't remember if he played. He might have played. I don't think he got too many snaps if he did. So it was Anderson, it was Riley, and it was Elijah Chapman. All rookies from the last 3 years. Anderson, rookie in 22. Riley, rookie in 23. Elijah Chapman, rookie in 24. So again, I cannot complain about that, where the past few years it's all this guy's gashing us versus the run. Now, I would like to see them against NFL talent, so that's where we have to wait against the Texans, against a guy like Dameon Pierce and whoever else they got in the backfield with the Texans to see if they gash us. I want to see who plays really well next to Dexter Lawrence. These are the things that we wait for, the evaluations when we're talking in camp and we're talking, oh, this guy had a good camp, this guy had a good camp. We got to wait for the games. And that's when, boom, the middle of the defensive line really proved themselves. So thank you to them for not making the Giants' life too easy in terms of evaluations. Now, they did well with pressures. Also, I got to credit one more guy, Timmy Horn. He had a pressure. Ryder Anderson had a pressure. Chapman had the most pressures at 4 and 1 sack. And that was pretty much that. I know Casey Rogers had a tackle for a loss in the running game. He would have had a sack, but he face masked the guy. So, again, most of the defensive line in the interior gets a big applause from me. Now you talk about the edge position. And that's where the worries come in to an extent. I'm not saying the edge position did bad. I'm talking about one particular player. One particular player being Azeez Ojulari. You look at the edge production in the game. You had Benton Whitley, who has a crazy wicked bend that we talked about in the roster bubble series. 2 quarterback hits, a sack, and a pressure. Okay? You got Boogie Basham, who did jack and shit last year. He had a sack and 2 pressures. You had Ovi Agufo, who had a pressure, a run stop, and a pass deflection on a 4th down that the Giants stopped them at when they were in the red zone. Azeez Ojulari, well, what did he do? He made 2 tackles. Made 2 tackles. I kind of said this a few months ago. I got flack for it. I said I wouldn't mind trading Azeez Ojulari once the Giants got another edge in here. Now they got Burns, and, Oj is not bad as a third rusher, but, I mean, against guys like Dan Skipper and Gio Manu and all those cats, I mean, I'd think Ojulari, who got a sack against Brian O'Neill of the Vikings, and several other cats over the last few years. I think he even got one in his rookie year off Jake Matthews, who's a solid tackle. And even if he didn't, it was Caleb McGarry, who's still a good tackle in this league. I mean, you're talking about a dish transformation, if anything, because he bulked up on muscle, he got injured more, and there's no production. Like last year, he had 2.5 sacks. Most of that was in the final game against the Eagles. So, you tell me, this is the guy, the Giants picked in the second round for a few years ago, and he's on his contract year. So you think, okay, maybe on a contract year, I should play a little bit better. Well, the results from the first preseason game really don't indicate a strong future. And you know what? Here's the thing. None of these guys should really be edge 3, if we're being completely transparent. Boogie Basham. He actually did pretty solid against the run. I think he bulked up a little bit. I don't know if there's a transformation there. I think he bulked up a little bit. He looks bigger than last year. He was a stick last year. Basham, Whitley, Agufo. None of those guys should be edge 3. They should be edge 4, which is fine. Let them battle out for special teams, etc., whatever. But Azeez, no production. I'm a little disappointed. But listen, that's his contract. That's his contract that he's playing for right now. But I do have to give credit to Benton Whitley, Boogie Basham, and Ovie Agufo on playing better than Azeez and producing. Because, again, the Giants last year had a very, very tough edge rusher situation where Timon Fox didn't do much of anything. I mean, he got a sack. Tashawn Bauer did decent. They didn't even keep him. Habakkuk Baldonado, they did not keep him. And there's one guy I'm probably forgetting in the back of my mind, but they didn't keep him either. So that's tough, but like to see the edge production here. That's what we want to see. And the defense, again, looked pretty good. Now, this guy is a man not to be messed with, and he has had a very, very, very good camp this far. Who's that man, you ask? Well, that man is Deontay Johnson. One of the first plays of the game, he gets a stop. Then he also gets a sack. And let's look at his total on the night. 1 sack, 2 tackles for a loss, and a quarterback hit. I would start ringing the alarm bell on possibly him not taking McFadden's job, but giving him a run for it, A. B, and maybe not a consistent rotation at that second linebacker spot. And I know Deontay Johnson was technically the Mike in the game against the Lions, but just imagine if Shane Bowen can get as creative as he did and give him the responsibilities he did against the Lions and let Deontay Johnson free flow. And I did mention before in his roster bubble series video, I said this guy fits the Giants defense and what they want to do. And guess what? He has played really well. From a guy last year that did jack and shit to a guy this year where he's playing for his life. He's playing out of his mind. And the Giants don't need too much linebacker depth at the moment because they got a solid couple of guys. But that's a good problem to have. And I wouldn't trade McFadden either. If for some reason Johnson ousted McFadden, I wouldn't trade McFadden. I'd keep him on the roster. Good special teamer. And a solid linebacker piece. Because if he goes down, meaning Johnson or Okereke, you have a guy in Micah McFadden who could fill in. Not that you ever want to get to that position. Let's see. Let's go to the secondary, and then we'll talk about a final subject, and we'll get you guys out of here. The secondary. I thought Deonte Banks looked good in limited time, so there's nothing really to dispute there. Tyler Nubin, I thought, looked good. Now, he didn't record a stat, to my knowledge. If you look at the ESPN site, they didn't have him as a guy who got a tackle or anything. But there was one really good play, really instinctive of Tyler Nubin, and he spent a long time in college, this, that, and the third. Really instinctive play where he just mows over the offensive lineman and then helps his teammates get a stop against the run. Now, you combine that with Drew Phillips, who made a great stop against the run. Two guys that could help the run, and they're not even defensive linemen. Combine that with Tibbs and Burns, who could play the run well, Dex, who's a monster, and someone solid next to Dex, and then you have Okereke. I mean, this run defense could really have a day this year, and I'd love to see it. The Giants haven't properly stopped the run in a long time. I want to say maybe 2016, maybe. Because 2022, they were not good against the run. Like, we had a solid pass D. The run D was awful. The run D was disgustingly awful. They brought in several DTs. It didn't work, whatever. But just imagine you have the defensive line that you do. Let's say Jordan Riley is the guy next to Dex. You have Okereke and Johnson. And then you have Nubin come in. And then you have Phillips. So that's what? 4, 2, and 2. That's 8 guys in the box. Now, traditionally, it's probably not going to be like that. But if you send Phillips on a run blitz, or you send him on a blitz in general, I would hate to be the quarterback or the mastermind of that offense. So, and I think that's honestly what a lot of people have forgotten about this game. What a lot of people forgot about, okay, yeah, Andrew Phillips had a nice day. He's really impactful. Oh, yeah, Tyler Nubin had a nice day. He's really impactful. They say that, but they don't really capture like the bigger picture. That this run defense could be slowly revamped. And you have to, if that's the case, if they do that, you have to credit Shane, you have to credit Dable, and you have to credit Shane Bowen for that. I think this guy also had a very good day. It has nothing to do with the run defense. I think Trey Hawkins had a good day. He had 1 or 2 tackles, made some really nice plays. There was one along the right sideline where I think it was Isaiah Williams was the wide receiver. I'd like Trey Hawkins to turn his head around on that one, but very good play. Very good play. It was an underthrown ball, but he was still good in coverage. I think he could make the roster. I think he's got to make a few more plays like that. Just be physical. Show your home in the defense. Show you're adapting to the defense. And, not totally screw up, because there's a lot of guys year to year, you're picked in the 6th, 7th round, and you're on the squad the first year. And the second year, you get cut. That would not be good on Joe Shane's track record, because he's kind of already done that with Darian Beavers. Trey Hawkins, I think, is headed for a better path, considering A, he didn't get injured, and B, he had a good preseason game. Now, would I throw him out to the Wolves week 1? No. And it is also a tad bit concerning that Cordell Flott's injured, because the Giants' second corner is not on this roster. But Trey Hawkins had a nice showcase. Trey Herndon had a good interception, but he fumbled. He did have a decent night. I'm not going to go over and say, yeah, he's making the roster. But he had a good night. Javarius Owens here and there. He did have a few nice plays, but there was a couple towards the end where it's very questionable. I think he was mowed down by an offensive lineman at one point, but there were a few bad plays by Javarius Owens. And you know what? I'll take that as a learning experience for Javarius Owens, because at least he's showing up on the tape. Last year, I really don't remember Javarius Owens showing up too much at all. I think he had a missed tackle, a few of them, in the Lions game this year on Thursday. But I'll take that as a learning experience, right? And he has time to learn, because Tyler Nubin is a better player than him. And you also got Belton. You got Jason Pinnock. He's got some time to learn. Hopefully Jalen Mills comes back soon, because the Giants do need a presence in that secondary that's veteran-esque. So, as far as the other backup corners, Goodrich, Caleb Hayes, didn't do much. Caleb Hayes was playing a bit of safety, though. As far as Christian Holmes, who was 2 days old on the roster, 3 days old on the roster. Didn't have a good night. He had a pass interference penalty. He had 2 catches given up, so not great on his part. And just the overall consensus that the cornerback 2 is not on the roster. So I guess the Giants will be scouting other teams and maybe even looking at some veteran options. Now, I will have to give Joe Schoen credit on this. This is not some ringing endorsement. This is not some, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 blah. But it is nice to see that most of the picks from Joe Schoen's 24 class showed out. Tyler Nubin, very good night. Crashed down, overpowered a lineman on a run play. Very instinctive. Andrew Phillips, he had a tackle for a loss on a run play. Tyrone Tracy, we talked about. And Darius Misal, who I purposely didn't mention till now. That is not supposed to rhyme, by the way. Darius Misal had a very good night. Very good night at the inside linebacker spot. To where you don't feel as good as saying, you don't feel that you need to say, or you're going to say, Matt Adams is going to make the roster or Darian Beavers. Now, again, 2 weeks. We have 2 weeks to go. And, Masal's play, is he going to be ready for week 1? No. There's no reason for him to be because you have Okereke Johnson, what looks to be, Isaiah Simmons, and Micah McFadden. There's no reason for him to be ready unless it's specials. So if Masal can be a good special teamer, the Giants can keep 4 linebackers and use the assets of the other positions. Carter Coughlin didn't get much burn, and he's usually a preseason star. Matt Adams didn't do much of anything. I think he had 1 or 2 bad plays, but he also had 1 or 2 good plays. And Darian Beavers led the Giants in tackles, but wasn't too impactful when it came down to the nitty-gritty. So Joe Schoen gets a compliment from myself in terms of the way the Giants did things in the draft, at least impact right now. Again, I don't know how this draft is going to grade out. It could look like shit in 5 years. It could look great in 5 years. But it's nice to know that these guys were at least impactful. Now, as far as the Theo Johnson thing, he blocked a little bit. You didn't see him too much. And as far as the Malik Neighbors thing, I really didn't think it was worth playing him. I mean, they probably got him reps just to get him reps. But at the end of the day, he was with Drew Lock, quarterback. That's not going to start week 1. And 2, he didn't get any catches. So I don't think it's a huge deal that, he didn't get any catches in a preseason debut. It's more on Lock than anyone, but that's just my thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe, folks. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or a video drops. Appreciate you coming back. Again, we're trying to do this Tuesdays and Saturdays, but the next one I have will probably be Thursday night or Friday morning. I'll have it uploaded. We're going to try to get a Texans content creator on, and so on and so forth from there. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in, and let's go Big